Hi, Scott. Thank you so much for coming on to Everyday Endorphins. It is so great to have you here.
Thank you. Yeah, pumped to be here.
So, we were just talking a little bit about like our own backgrounds and my entry point into Mayo, but for those who are listening and who have no idea how I even got exposed to Mayo and everything that you are doing, I had the opportunity to come into the space about a month and a half ago and experience firsthand this really interesting and innovative take on physical therapy. I got exposed to Mayo through Othership. We love Robbie and the team. So shout out to Othership. And it's so amazing to be in the wellness space and connected to such like minded individuals who are pushing the needle on what it means to take care of ourselves from a physical, mental, and emotional perspective. So, really excited to have you here today and would love to start out by having you talk a little bit about the inspiration for the brand and where this all started for you.
Yeah, so I had no intentions to start this company. It sort of found me, and I think a lot of founders start this way, which is very organic how it came to be. So my story is I injured my back pretty badly in my early 20s, was doing dumb things in the gym, as many of us do. For a few years, became like really a connoisseur of therapy, unfortunately. So I became really acquainted seeing physios and chiros and massage therapists and osteopaths, and I was learning a lot about my own body in the pathway. But through that experience, realized just what a terrible experience the average person has at therapy. First of all, everyone was telling me something different was going on with my body. So I had oftentimes not only different answers, but opposing answers, right? Someone saying it's coming from your hip, it's coming from your back, it's coming from all these places. Two, I found that just like the sense of confidence of like, wow, this, I might have got some real relief from a session, but then the next day I'm in worse pain or something's gone wrong. So it wasn't until I met my co-founder Vin, who has become just this incredible sort of celebrity physical therapist, kind of 10 years in. But when I met him, I was working out of effectively a two-bedroom condo in downtown Toronto, and a mutual friend had connected us. I started going to see him as a client, and I just fell in love both with him and his vision for the world. But he actually got me real results. So within 3 sessions, I was out of pain. I started to come and see him every single week. And at the time, he had one little clinic in Toronto. After just a few months of me going regularly, he had asked me if I could support him on the business a little bit. And Vin is this incredible kind of promoter, networker, clinician. But when it comes to kind of the operating side of the business, that was all fairly new to him. And I didn't necessarily have a much longer set of experience. I was 25 years old at the time when we started Mayo, but I sort of saw the opportunity to do something interesting. So I ended up investing in the first clinic. I thought it was going to be one location and, this nice little side business. And then long story short, Vin started blowing up on social media. So when I met him, he had a few thousand followers on Instagram. Today he's got like over 500,000. But in the early days, it was just like, treat this calisthenics influencer, and all of a sudden he went from 3,000 to 6,000. Then he treated this other influencer, and it was really, from 2015 to 2018 was an incredible time to be a content marketer on Instagram because the algorithm was rewarding educational content just at an incredible clip. At some points during 2017 and 2018, we were getting over like 30 million impressions a week on Instagram alone. So it was a really interesting story of just where we started the business. We thought it was going to be more of like an education platform doing certifications for clinicians. Vin's passion at the time was like, how do you educate and inspire the world to take care of their bodies? And he had come from working 6 or 7 years in the physical therapy space prior to me meeting him, and he was pretty disillusioned because most physical therapists, when they come out of school, if they don't want to work in the hospital setting, there's really only two options today. So one is working for these mom and pop clinics, which it's a very fragmented industry. So you have an opportunity to be in the community and get great mentorship, but there's not really any career trajectory. And then the other option is working for these like private equity backed insurance mills, where it's so much less about the individual client or patient coming in. It's much more about like how many insurance units can you bill in any given day. So in those insurance mills, you're seeing sometimes 30 to 40 people per day. You only get about 10 or 15 minutes with any individual client or patient. So it creates this huge burnout effect where we call it compassion fatigue, where clinicians really want to do the best work and help people, but the system actually stops them from doing that. So when I intersected with Vin, he was completely disillusioned, was almost ready to leave the industry, which is why he started leaning into content marketing and wanted more just be kind of education guy. But then one thing led to another, and as he blew up online, we started doing some trips down to New York, to LA. We met some incredible people from Equinox and SoulCycle and Berries, and this was really in the peak of boutique fitness blowing up before COVID. And we sort of just had this aha moment of like, wow, wouldn't it be interesting if you took all these playbooks that are working really well for boutique fitness around hospitality and brand and experience and culture and actually bring those playbooks into the therapy category, which is incredibly sleepy. There's been no innovation. There's no sort of like brand first thinking. It's very stuck in traditional healthcare. You walk in almost any clinic and it's white walls and anatomy posters, and there's not really a nod to aesthetics. It's, Swiss balls scattered everywhere and equipment. So we just took an approach of like, how do we actually build a brand around this such that we can speak to a younger consumer that we already saw, because that was us, that our generation just much more willing to spend on preventive healthcare. So that's the quick background.
Wow, I love it. I have lots of follow-up thoughts and questions, but to your point around, like, bringing this experiential element to traditional physical therapy, it's so true. I think there's such a bad, like, rap on physical therapy or, I have friends that'll talk about, "Oh, I have to go do PT because of this injury, and it's a drag, it's a chore, I don't wanna be there. Oh, I have to do these exercises." It feels like a burden to their lifestyle when it
So we've done the consumer insights position. The word that comes up is grudge purchase. Like people, they begrudge going. They go because they want an outcome, but they absolutely hate the experience of going.
Exactly, and when we think about kind of the aesthetics and how do we create a welcoming environment where people are excited to be in that space, it's probably creating kind of an atmosphere where you're evoking like an emotional response out of that person where they're more inclined to want to take care of themselves because they're getting such a positive experience while they're there. So instead of kind of they're resistant to going, instead it's turning that resistance to excitement and getting them like really excited to take care of their bodies and going back to your own personal narrative around having that back pain in your 20s and trying all these different methods but nothing working, but then finally meeting Vin and within 3 sessions, like, really helping to improve your back. Where was the difference for you? Like, what did you see be done differently that actually helped you get to the outcome that you were looking? Was, like, Vin doing some sort of, like, magical thing? Like, what was going on there that for you helped?
Yeah, so it's less than modality. So I'm not putting down on physio or chiro or massage, but it's more the application of such. So a lot of, I'll call it legacy of traditional PT. It's very much like if you have a shoulder issue and you come in, we're going to only be able to touch your shoulder if we're billing insurance. And more broadly, like most people don't have the time to like truly do a full body assessment. So on the other side of the spectrum, and like one thing that's a huge differentiator for Myo is we're really looking at the full body as a global system first. So even our logo, those little triangles, it's called the tensegrity model. So that's from Buckminster Fuller, this like incredible architect. The core of that idea is like everything is connected to everything else, right? And that's how our body works, right? Before we started the call, you were sharing about how you had some IT band issues, and like ultimately, as a clinician, we shouldn't just be looking at your IT band. We need to be looking upstream, downstream, like truly where is the root cause of that. And I think the traditional system is pretty broken because it doesn't actually allow for enough time for like a real comprehensive full body assessment, nor is the training, whether inside of like the traditional education or like a lot of the kind of follow-on membership, actually trained to that level. So there's just like this like global holistic way that Vin almost came from the other angles. Said, let's watch you walk. Let's see what's happening with your rib cage. How's your shoulder impacting through the rib cage into your spine, into your lower back, what's going on with your hips, what's going on with your arches. So there was kind of this center point of like looking at me as an entire system and human. And then beyond that, right, it's like, how's your stress? How's your sleep? How's your hydration? Like all these things that feed into chronic pain in particular, that I think that the best analogy I think about is like the traditional kind of legacy PT experience is almost like you are a car coming in for a spark plug change. And the clinician treats you as a mechanic does, which is like, okay, you can do 7 degrees this way and 32 degrees this way, and we're gonna, make sure you can get to like clinically indicated best range of motion. But we are so much more than that, right? We are these like living, breathing organisms, and I think that is just philosophically what was different. Is I felt like a human being in Vin's treatment, and he was really kind of meeting me there versus like traditional PT is very much like patient and the authoritative doctor who just has all the answers. And that's kind of core to one of our biggest insights we've had is every single session, we want someone leaving with an aha moment about their body, right? So it's not about us being authoritative clinical professionals that we have all the answers. It's ultimately how do we work with you in partnership to actually help you understand your body. So have our vision for the company is how do we have every human be empowered with the clarity and confidence to take care of their bodies. And those two things are really intentional. The clarity, so you actually understand what's going on, and the confidence that you can take action on it. You don't have to wait for somebody else that's not you to help you along the way.
Right, exactly, and when we have more confidence over what we should be doing to take care of ourselves, I feel like we're more inclined to take that action because we know exactly what we need to do. Sometimes there's like this paralysis of decision or action because we don't even know where to start. And then it's like this negative spiral that we can get into and where we're not showing up for ourselves and in the healthiest ways to support our bodies. And I feel like what you're describing about the traditional PT experience is also really representative in the way we think traditionally about just like the doctor patient relationship. It's like you come in with an issue and the doctor is just looking to like fix that problem, but they're not getting to the root cause. And it sounds a lot like Mayo's adopted like more Eastern philosophy and methodology around integrative care and like really getting to that root cause and understanding that the body is like this very interconnected system. I didn't even realize that there was meaning behind the actual logo and symbol of Mayo, which I think is brilliant because it's another way to kind of communicate that core principle and message of the brand. I would love to kind of hear a little bit more about this concept of future proofing, because I think that when I came into the space and I got to do my first session, I learned a little bit about it then, and then also through being onboarded as part of the creator community, I've been kind of trying to educate myself on this idea of future proofing. But I would love to hear from you what that term means and how people can start to think about taking care of their bodies from a more preventative perspective rather than like, I have this issue now, I need to react and treat the issue.
Yeah, look, I think Futureproof came pretty early in the company's sort of evolution. I think a few years in, we started like talking about this all the time, like future-proofing your body. And what it meant at the time was really about like, what are you doing today to set yourself up for a better tomorrow? Right? And that's every little action, whether that's going to sleep earlier, whether that's eating better, whether that's staying hydrated, whether that's cutting down on alcohol. Like those are all to me like future-proof behaviors. But when it came to future-proofing your body, one thing we talk about a lot is like injury avoidance and surgery avoidance in a big way because we have this crazy epidemic, especially in the US, around later in life surgeries for lower back, neck. The amount of dollars that are spent on musculoskeletal issues in the US alone are actually more than diabetes, cancer, heart disease. It is astounding. And unfortunately, like people aren't really doing anything about it other than getting surgeries earlier and earlier because we're now sitting on these devices, we're moving less post COVID. There's just like a lot of these societal and technological factors that are actually driving us to almost age physically in ways that like aren't very empowering. So, future proof to us is a container because ultimately like why I'm future proofing, like I have a 3-year-old and a 10-month-old daughter, like I want to do a lot of things with them in my life and in the world. And they're a huge motivator for me to be able to like stay limber and strong and be able to do all the things I want. Other people, depending at their stage of life, they may be, wanting to do bigger hikes or wanting to do a marathon, like whatever the case is. So ultimately, future proof is about unlocking what do you love to do today and how long do you want to keep doing that for. So it's about aging gracefully and being able to like sort of move with full mobility, power, purpose to the full extent of your body. And I think over time, it just really became this like sticky concept. So even our treatment methodology recently rebranded to our future proof method, which is again sort of like our 5 phase framework for how we help someone understand their body to a point where they have more autonomy and confidence to be able to take care of it over the long term.
Yeah, I love that. And so when we were talking before getting on the line here, I shared a little bit about my experience. And when I went in, I've never actually really had many injuries. Like, I knock on wood, I've never broken a bone. I've been pretty okay. I'm also a yoga instructor, so I've got pretty good mobility, which is great, I think. And, I'm generally very fit and healthy. I like to stay active. But I was telling my clinician that when I was in high school and I was on a rowing team, I had this issue with my IT band. And I had been to like do PT a little bit in high school just to kind of mitigate that issue then. And it never really presented itself again, didn't act up. It will only really show itself when I go for runs or if I'm like running not properly or whatever it is. Like it's kind of random whenever this issue decides to act up again. And I thought I took care of the problem and then it just surfaced again recently. So it was perfect timing to be introduced to Mayo. But for someone who is like generally healthy and like baseline, okay, has good mobility, strength, all the things, you never really know when your body can change or something can happen. And so I'm just curious to hear like from most of the people that come into Mayo and are seen by different clinicians, is it to help with an ongoing injury or is it to better understand their bodies and prevent any future type of injury? Where do you see that range occur?
Yeah. So I think what you're speaking to is really like actually the consumer shift that we see underway right now, which is actually people recognizing there's a lot going on under the surface before something truly like gets injured or you have an issue. And I think the best analogy is actually looking at the dental industry. So in the mid 1900s, people's teeth falling out in middle age was actually pretty commonplace. People didn't actually take care of their teeth very well. There wasn't a lot of education. People didn't really understand like what preventive care looked like. And then over a few generations of really successful educating by the dental industry, people understood today that we floss every day, we brush twice a day. I'm teaching my daughters this. Like as society adapts to certain behaviors and having a nice smile is all of a sudden like a, it's an important thing in societies, as is, I think, more and more like having good posture and being generally healthy. So the dental industry is interesting because the average person today understands here's how I take care of my teeth. I go and see my dental hygienist a few times a year, right? Just because you get your teeth cleaned, like, of course, you're going to use your teeth. So you probably have to come back again. And it's exactly like our bodies. Like, of course, you come in for therapy and you're feeling better and you walk out, but nobody is perfect. We all have compensations and sort of tendencies of how we like to move based on the millions of different things that have been put into our system over the years. So all of us effectively are moving around, getting our bodies dirty, so to speak. And if we're not unwinding some of that and sort of restoring it back to our more natural alignment or natural posture, over time, those compensations lead into susceptibility to injury. And then those actually become injuries. And then once you have injuries, there's a whole other cascade of other things that you start compensating. So it's kind of this, this self-fulfilling prophecy that injured people get more injured.
Right. It's like the domino effect at that point.
Exactly. When you have multiple cavities, like, you're more prone to get other stuff going on if you're just not taking care of your teeth. So, it's not a crazy complicated concept to understand, but from a behavioral standpoint, I don't think the world has really been there in terms of actually understanding there are things you can do. So, I think the biggest shift we see with Mayo is like the traditional industry or even the way we society thinks about it is like, if I'm injured, I should go. If I have a surgery or I have a car accident or something major, I should go and see a physical therapist. But otherwise, like, why would I need to go? I'm healthy. And on the other side, you have kind of massage therapy as almost like this luxury self-care. Like, maybe my back's tight and I'll go, but more people look at it as like it's kind of like a once in a while self-care thing. So for the Maya, like, our clients are this huge middle group that aren't injured enough to go to a traditional PT, aren't really getting fixed or kind of feel permanent relief from massage, but they might have something going on. And it might be, hey, my knee's been bothering me at Barry's class the last 3 weeks, or "Ugh, my neck's like feeling really locked up." Like there's usually something going on, which we'll call dysfunction, that gets somebody to come in the door to Myo. And then we start to, that's our opportunity to educate them on really the dental hygienist model. Like, let's get you out of pain and get you sort of restored. And then after that, what is the right cadence for you based on your goals and what's going on with your body, to come back to see your clinician on a regular basis to make sure A, you're continuing to learn about your body, B, you have an accountability partner, and then C, you're getting great quality care that's right for you.
The dental hygienist model is a really great analogy to draw because you're exactly right. Like, people just didn't really have that education or understanding around like how to actually take care of their teeth and our bodies. I mean, we're using them every day. Our bodies are under a ton of stress now, especially just being in a very corporate environment. Like, a lot of people sit at their desk all day, we're hunched over. My posture is really not that great. It could definitely be improved. And so these are things we don't actively think about. And I think the unfortunate reality is like we often kind of overlook a lot of the kind of fundamentals to our health and our well-being until there's a problem, and once there's a problem we're like, "Oh, we have to address this now." So being reactive rather than proactive, right? And to that line of thinking, I'd love to hear what you would like people to start to think about when it comes to like the future of pain and prevention. Like, how do you want people to think differently about these concepts, or how they see themselves engaging with pain in their bodies, and how to prevent that?
Yeah, so we're fortunate we get to like get exposed to like all things longevity right now, and it's such a wave. Like, I look at businesses like Prenuvo or Superpower, who I'm an investor in, or Function Health. Like, it's so interesting because pre-COVID, these businesses almost couldn't exist because the consumer willingness to spend wasn't quite there. So I just think the like cultural consciousness has shifted majorly the last 2 or 3 years, as evidenced by Peter Attia, Andrew Huberman, Brian Johnson. Like, there's just been really this like wave of longevity, sort of going from like very early adopters, like the early biohacker types, to truly like people who are into health, like can kind of speak fluently about all these things now. So I have mixed feelings about some of these things because I think there's a lot of things that are very cool, but it's almost like icing on the cake. Like, there are some fundamental things we should be doing for our body. And I think a lot of people like are so focused on like the cutting edge of optimization when they're sleeping 5 hours a night, or they're actually not doing kind of regular strength training, just like all these basics. So at the end of the day, I think real foundational health is simple, and it's about the choices that we make. And I actually don't think you need to be spending a ton of money on your body, or, spending in some cases millions of dollars a year on yourself. So I think the basics are sound. And ultimately, our goal is not to have somebody come every single day to Maya. Like if somebody's coming once a month or once a quarter, like that is a great relationship for us. And ultimately, what we want to do is be supportive guides, coaches, and clinical authorities to help support those individuals on their journey. So my sense is most people overcomplicate. I would say there's actually two people. One is a lot of people just don't educate themselves on just the basics that they could feel so much better or be living a much better life, especially when it comes to pain and sort of managing that. And by the way, sometimes many of us have chronic pain issues that we may never live without pain. And that's okay. Pain is not the enemy. Pain is just a signal, and our body's telling us something, right? That is really just like the way it gives us messages. So ultimately, if you do have pain, it's like, how do you get comfortable with that and have a better sense of underlying, like, what can you actually do to manage that and, yeah, live a full, happy life despite some of these physical limitations. And then on the other hand, I think and I definitely have a lot of these in my network, people that are so obsessive with optimizing every single thing in their life that they sort of lose the script, which is, I think so much of life is actually just being able to like savor the moment. And, I look at people that wear Whoop and Aura and like all these wearables, and they're letting machines almost tell them how they feel versus remembering like we have such strong intuition to actually check in with ourselves of like, well, how's my body? Should I push today? How's this feeling? How am I feeling warming up? So it's interesting. I actually think like sometimes people that go too far into kind of the cutting edge of longevity and biohacking, they become very fragile in a way. They need their absolute optimized sleeping environment, their 8 sleep, their sleep mask, everything. And I think having kids for me has just gotten me way more comfortable with like the volatility of like nothing is perfect. Everything's all over the place all the time.
The Lessons of Parenthood Part 2 podcast.
Yeah.
I'm glad you bring up these like 2 ends of the spectrum because I feel like sometimes I also oscillate, and it's difficult because I do agree with you. The health really comes back to those foundational principles. Like, are you sleeping enough? Are you fueling your body with like proper nutrition? Are you getting in movement? And are you laughing and spending time with people that make you feel good? Like how is the quality of your relationships and your friendships in life? And it really is, I think, that simple, right? And it's like once we have that baseline, we can then go from there to different tweaks in our lifestyle to, let's say, optimize our well being. But then to your point, you have the people like really on the other end of the spectrum who are so obsessed with needing all these gadgets and tools and whatever to like be healthy. But the more you do that, I feel like the further away you get from really like what true well being is because we can't like hyperfixate or control every single little thing, that we put in our bodies or we surround in our environment. And I like to think back to like the generations before me and like way back in time where we didn't have access to this type of advanced technology and people were healthy and happy. I mean, you think about the blue zones as well. Like, what are they doing to live longer lives? And I believe that the research really points to our relationships. I think that's really what the driving factor is to a sense of well being and life satisfaction and possibly longevity. But, I don't have an Aura ring, and a lot of my friends do. I've thought about wanting to get it, but I'm afraid that, like, do I actually need this device to tell me if I slept well? Like, I can pretty much get the sense when I'm not feeling rested. So it's like, to what degree is leaning into all of this advanced technology and like biohacking and all the advanced analytics actually moving the needle towards making us healthier and happier? And it's maybe a more philosophical question. And
Well, I think that's the heart of it, which is like it's a personal choice, right? It sort of depends on like how you want to define health for yourself. Like all things being equal, I would much rather people lean into wearables and get obsessed about their health and really enjoy it versus like not care at all, because I think that leads to a healthier world. But yeah, like last year, for example, I moved to Costa Rica for most of the year. So I've like lived in a blue zone, and I can tell you, like, I think it's all marketing in general, but
interesting. Okay.
yeah, that's a whole nother conversation. But I think that it's easy to like paint the backwards narrative of like, of course, like the world was so simple decades ago or 100 years ago or 20 years ago, and like there's a lot of challenges with like infectious disease and other things. But really, since 1900 and like a child mortality has come down and everything, like the world's been a healthy place. I think the thing we're dealing with today is the world is manic, right? We have so much inputs where a lot of people subconsciously are just seeking more and more control because life feels very out of control from a societal level, whether you look at politics or everything going on in the world. So I think it's a little bit of a symptom of that as well. Like there is a tamping down of anxiety when you feel like you've got some control in life, and like the reality is we have. no control, but the perception of, oh wow, like I have moved my whoop score up, or I've been able to like track my macros and all that stuff. And for me, like my personal story is I lost my mom when I was quite young in my early teens, and I really got into fitness when I was 15 or 16. And like I look back now, why I got so obsessed with it the first 3 or 4 years was it's the first time I really felt a sense of control over my life, when I could weigh my chicken breast and feel like, okay, I've gained 2 pounds in the last 2 weeks, and here's exactly how I'm progressing towards these goals. Like it really helps you get a bit of an anchor in life, I would say. And I think that's helpful. Everyone's at different points of life with mental health and their own journey. So at certain points in time, I think that's very helpful. And at certain points in time, like I think there's such a freedom to letting go and not being so consumed with just being like so quantified in a sense, and being able to be a little bit more embodied with your experience.
Right. I think that's well said. It's probably better to lean towards the end of the spectrum where you're seeking control, using, wearables and getting really excited by this concept of, okay, I can dictate the outcome of my health rather than just not caring about it at all. But it's also a matter of like, well, how do we dance alongside the reality of life and that everything is basically uncertain and like there really is only so much we can control, which is basically nothing. So it's like how do we walk that fine line and learn to adapt as things change around us. And it's funny that you bring up parenthood because I feel like that's actually such a good example of like learning how to relinquish control and just do your best every day to like keep your kids healthy and happy and safe when dealing with children is a very hard thing and raising kids is not an easy feat. Not that I'm speaking from personal experience because I don't have any children, but I'm thinking back to like just being a kid and now as I'm 25, which is the age I guess you started Mayo, I'm like my brain is exploding. I'm thinking about my parents and raising me as when I was a kid and probably all the sacrifices they had to make and what it's like dealing with the uncertainty of raising a child. But I digress. I would love to go back to what you brought up in your kind of founding story, interest into the health and wellness world, and then also when you were introduced to Vin. So I know we're kind of jumping back to the beginning of this interview, but you mentioned that you kind of came in as more of that like business minded, operationally focused guy in this partnership as you were building Mayo together. What informed your interest in business and entrepreneurship? Had you been working in the business world prior? What kind of led you into the space of starting a company and becoming an entrepreneur?
Yeah. I didn't never really had like a business per se before, but when I was 15 or 16, I used to do a lot of like internet marketing, building websites. I used to be like super addicted to World of Warcraft and used to buy and sell accounts, and skipped a lot of university to do that. And then it was personal training and just had these like little side things. And I think we can call it efficiency, but ultimately like I definitely want to take like the shortest path A to B. And like I have a very high drive for like autonomy and personal freedom. And I've never been a great employee. I've been fired multiple times in my life, and just tend to, when someone else is putting structure and rules and I think that they make no sense, I get overly rebellious. And it's just this emotional reaction I tend to have. I'm very allergic to overly structured things or obligations being put on me. So
Wait till your daughters become teenagers. Just
yeah, I mean, my 3-year-old's already there, but she can't fire me, so that's okay. But yeah, it's just like I don't know. There's no like grand plan to become an entrepreneur or anything. It was almost like I went into it expecting we were going to have this little side business. And I still had, at the time I was working for a European telecom business and was enjoying it a lot, and enjoying the owner of the company, who was like becoming a great mentor to me. So I actually learned quite a bit for the few years prior to starting Mile from him about kind of all things business, trademarks, negotiating agreements, a lot of sales stuff. So I think that, I felt it was almost like there was the right puzzle pieces in place, and Maya was like the opportunity that sort of showed up. And I think in hindsight, like after 10 years of building Maya, I actually think there are certain archetypes of entrepreneurs. I think everyone needs a 0 to 1 person to start the company. Then you sort of have like this 1 to 10 once you have some product market fit. How do you actually get it to like some reasonable scale? And then you're kind of in the 10 to 100 phase. Like how do you actually like truly scale it to something meaningful? And I think Vin was this like incredible 0 to 1 partner. And I'm actually not 0 to 1. I've been fortunate to invest in like Othership and Superpower. I'm really close with Robbie from Othership, for example, and like he's another example of like the 0 to 1 archetype, which is like from scratch he can get people just on fire about an idea and like bring the audience. And to me, the single most important thing for these 0 to 1 entrepreneurs is how do you have people pull out their wallets and pay for, not only pay for something, but then tell everyone how great the experience was. And I think both Vin and Robbie are actually pretty parallel in that sense. Is like they are incredible at both of those things, like getting people to care, getting people to feel like, wow, I am on like the cutting edge of a movement. So I actually don't think my sweet spot 0 to 1. I actually think, these later stages, I feel like I'm becoming a much better CEO, and that's both a time in thing, having done it and made a lot of mistakes. I can't remember where I read this, but it's really stuck with me, which is I think there's a lot of people that can be born as founders, but nobody is born as a CEO. Right? I think there are natural things as a founder, or in other words, like a 0 to 1 type person that you might have it. You might just have this charisma and the ability to like convince, persuade, inspire. But as a CEO, you sort of have to just make a ton of mistakes because otherwise you just can't truly get the wisdom and the discernment to understand like when to make certain decisions, when not to, when to, whether it's to hire, to fire, to raise capital, like all these decisions that inevitably you'll make thousands of mistakes. And like the whole goal is just like, don't die, like don't kill the company.
So how do you navigate this reality that, you're gonna make a ton of mistakes? How do you keep things afloat, and how do you stay aligned to that broader vision that ideally getting everyone rallied around within the company? How do you keep that strong when maybe you feel a bit uncertain at times because you're human and that's what humans do?
The raw truth is just incredibly painful and challenging. Like probably for the first like 6 to 7 years of Maya was sort of just swinging from like wild depression to wild anxiety and back and forth again. Like, and it just sucks. It really is like I think people that do well in the CEO seat or entrepreneur seat are like a bit of pain or for whatever reason have an attraction to it because it's not it gets more fun. Like now, like the company's doing great and we've got a big team and everything. But I think the first like 3 to 7 years for most companies are just brutal. And I think a lot of there's a survivorship bias, whether it's on LinkedIn or magazines or anything. We see all these companies that are raising all these big rounds and doing great and getting lots of press, and you don't see the 99 other companies that go to fail. And then what's been crazy the last 3 or 4 years, because I've been super close to dozens of stories of companies that have raised 30, 50, 100, $200 million of capital and end up just hitting a wall, either having to close or just like get stuck and the founder gets fired. Like it's always like, the story's not done till the story's done. And I think as a younger founder or entrepreneur, it's so easy to get so delusional about like what success looks like from these curated press articles and like the storytelling online and LinkedIn and social. But so much I think of the like how you stick it out over a decade plus is actually just like, for me, like I journal a ton and I'm always like coaching myself through. I've, worked with an executive coach that I've probably done north of 200 sessions with. As you start to like really lean into the CEO journey, it exposes you emotionally on so many levels, like how you actually show up to communicate, to have hard conversations, to make tough decisions. Like if you have to move somebody off of the team, like that's an emotional one. And I just think like being a CEO is like a whole human job. Like you will get exposed on every level of like how you're showing up, how you're communicating. So I love it in the sense of like I don't think there's a better arena for personal growth. Like I think actually going out and trying stuff and seeing how you react to everything that the world will throw at you is incredibly interesting just from a personal growth and self-actualization standpoint. But it's not a path I would actually recommend for most people because I think it's yeah, it's filled with like a lot of pain and introspection and challenges.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a really good point, and it reminds me of, they say that life imitates art. Like I made a TikTok a few weeks, a month, whatever, recently about how entrepreneurship actually imitates life because when you're in like the driver's seat and you're building and you have a vision and you're working towards this goal, but you're the only one that's like technically holding yourself accountable to doing it. And you take it upon yourself to want to build and to communicate and to put something out into the world. That takes a lot of time and energy and effort. And now, especially as social media is a platform to be leveraged to gain awareness and brand awareness and community, like to put yourself out there and to be vulnerable is a very hard thing to do. And it pushes you, I think, to be a better person, and it shows you how you show up in certain situations. So it really is kind of such an intense environment that's kind of like an accelerator to personal growth, to your point. And, it's something that I'm kind of reconciling with as I continue to build the podcast and also just build more of a brand around everyday endorphins. So, I mentioned this earlier, but I love getting to talk to founders because I think it's really encouraging to get to hear other people's stories and how they've navigated the uncertainty and ambiguity and remain very steadfast in that like broader mission. And I do think you need to develop like a sense of almost like delusional self-belief, because that's what will propel you to, at least in my own experience, like to keep going even if you've quote unquote failed or didn't succeed in the way that you wanted to. When you think back to being 25 and like just starting, would you have imagined Mayo growing to where it is today? And from this point onwards, like where are those aspirations? Where do you hope to be in the next 5, 10, 15 years?
I mean, definitely not. I think my early goals is like if I could make some passive income and travel internationally, just be a digital nomad and read my books, that was like success to me. But I think the thing I've like really learned on the journey is just like the power of compounding. I'm still unwrapping some programming around this, which is I think a lot of young entrepreneurs get really programmed. You have to make it work within like 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, like the bulk of a lot of like the press and podcasts, everything we like hear, it's so much about like the venture capital world, which is like a very small amount of the capital that gets invested in businesses, and it's typically a very fast growing tech startups. So we get very warped as a kind of collective of entrepreneurs, thinking about how fast these businesses take, how fast you can grow them. But when you look at like a Microsoft or Amazon or Google, like these businesses that truly like, we can't imagine life without them now. Like they were taking, 25, 30 years to like really come into their full fruition. So I look at Whole Foods and Starbucks as two like personal kind of inspiring journeys for me of just looking at like those businesses took, multiple decades to truly reach what they are today. So I don't set long-term goals generally. I tend to like just enjoy it. So I don't necessarily like in 10 years I want to be here, but I think just following the trajectory, like Maya is definitely pacing to be sort of like a one of one brand. Like we will be the first global brand of therapy. You will expect to see us in 6 or 7 countries over the next 5 years. We're continuing to expand it in New York, LA, we'll get to some other cities, but ultimately like the core of what we're trying to do is just sort of shift the world's thinking. So our mission right now that we think about and talk about internally is like how do we raise body IQ around the world, and what that means ultimately is like how do we help people truly understand themselves and their bodies, and if something goes wrong or they want to improve, like what's the path to do that. So it's fun. Last year alone I think we did over 250,000 one-on-one sessions. So the impact is real. Like we're having positive impact on like every single community. So the fulfillment's already there. I think it's more continue to find like new challenges both for myself and for our team to keep growing this, but
That's amazing. I am so happy to now be in your orbit and to get to experience my own. Very stoked that you guys have expanded to New York and to now be a part of the creator program is really exciting for me, and finding ways to marry kind of the message that I'm promoting with my platform on focusing on the things in life that spark joy, and Mayo's messaging on increasing like body IQ and understanding what it means to really like take a hold of your own well-being and get excited to do that. There's a lot of synergy there, and I'm really excited to see kind of how Mayo is going to continue to evolve and expand, and all the positive impact that you all are making on everyone. Yeah, and to that point, the whole message of the show is around happiness and focusing on the things in life that really do spark joy. So I'll leave you with a few final questions in this area. So the first is, how do you define happiness, and how has that definition evolved over the course of your life and just through entrepreneurship as well?
North America has, I think, an interesting programming around happiness, which is so much tied to success and money and all these things. And then when you start to get some of that, and especially when you start to be around people that have not only like won that game, but won it 100 times over, and whether it's people worth hundreds of millions or billions, and you realize like everyone is sort of managing through the same thing, which is ultimately like our relationship with ourselves, right? Like, do we love ourselves? Do we validate ourselves? Do we acknowledge ourselves? Like all these things that as kids we're learned to externalize, and as adults we learn to actually have start to internalize again. So for me personally, I think Naval Ravikant has this great quote, which is like, retirement is when when today is complete in its own right and you're not sort of chasing a imagined tomorrow, like you're quote retired. I think about that a lot. Like my daughter who's 3 years old, when she's jumping in our bed at midnight, it's so easy to be like, oh, like I have to wake up early, we have to work, all this stuff. But more and more I'm saying, wow, I only get this for a few more years. And these are like the happiest, like most savor worthy moments of my life. And I will never get these moments back. So I think so much is about just being like present in the moment and realizing how short and transient like all of these moments are. And like life will have many, many chapters and different seasons, and sort of be able to like just be in each one of them. So I think more broadly though, from a happiness perspective, I think like ignoring a lot of things. So I actually don't have an Instagram. Like I deleted that three or 4 years ago. Like I don't have TikTok. I have no social media because I don't want societal programming of like telling me pay attention to this or pay attention to that. I think attention is the most precious resource we have, especially in modern days. So I think about that a lot in terms of daily meditation, long walks without my phone, time in nature, just like simple stuff. So I tend to, yeah, just really enjoy my family time, my friends, and not get so caught up in like some imagined future 10 years from now, because ultimately when you really look at the people that have unlimited money, it's like their days don't feel different. They have more help, they have more support, but like at the end of the day, like we're all looking for meaning, happiness, connection, community, health, well-being, and being able to have that freedom. And I think ultimately that's like the underscore of entrepreneurship. What I love is like the complete flexibility and freedom. I'm in Toronto right now with my family for a month and a half. We're going to head back to LA. Last year we spent most of the year in Costa Rica. I actually had my second daughter in Costa Rica, which was a really cool experience. But like having these like beautiful tapestry of life of like so many different shared experiences with people I love, like that to me is like the root of happiness.
Oh, I love well, see, you kind of brought back what I had mentioned up earlier around how so much of the research in positive psychology points to the strength of our relationships that really influence our well-being. And that's kind of the common denominator of what I hear across all my interviews and really like that more deep understanding and perspective on like what it means to actually be happy. And on my own personal reflections, I like to have a plan. I like to know exactly when things are happening. Then I get humbled by life because I make the plan and then life happens and the plan does not happen as I expect for it to. And so I've noticed for myself, like the moments I'm happiest are when I actually am present. To your point, I'm not over engineering what's going to happen in 3 hours, in 3 days, in 3 months. It's because you never know really what can unfold. It's like, how do you really enjoy where you're at currently? And that is hard for humans because we like, we crave comfort, familiarity, we crave control. Some of us more than others, like myself. So it's been kind of this lifelong challenge for me. And something that I'm working towards is cultivating more presence in life too. But I think these are also great reminders to journal and to spend time in nature and to really kind of prioritize being around the people that you love. You definitely won't get those years back, so enjoy it now while you have it.
The one thing I'd say just to react to that is I actually it gets way easier as you get older. Like it's so hard in your 20s because you really are trying to chart your course for all these open decisions. And I actually found like my life happiness and just general anxiety went down massive. Sorry, happiness went up, anxiety went down when first I got married. All of a sudden like I'm just building this life with this person. I don't have to like spend all this energy other things. And once we had our girls, like all of a sudden it's just like all of these potential paths just like narrowed down to like this path. And I actually think commitment is like the single biggest life hack in a sense for happiness. And I think a lot of us avoid it for way too long. I actually think that it is such a fun experience to like build a life long term, either with a partner or friends or whatever. So it gets easier as you get older for sure.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that the 20s are just like it's a very challenging decade because it's like you're starting adulthood at this point, so you're kind of like a kid in the world of adulthood and you're trying to figure it out and there's maybe like a paralysis of choice because there's so many potential paths that you could go down. So that's kind of the phase of life I'm in right now, but I'm trying to see it through a lens of like excitement rather than like anxiety around having decision fatigue over should I do this or should I do that? But it can feel very overwhelming for sure.
It will. I mean, we have a ton of people in their 20s and early 30s in our team. Like I always tell people in the 20s, like it's just gonna be a shit show. You're gonna be super anxious for the next 5 years, 6 years, that's fine, but, like, the goal is to get a bunch of different experiences. Like, say yes to a bunch of different things because that is gonna teach you more quickly than anything else of, like, what you like, who you don't like, all of these things that then inform a little bit more of a direction in your 30s, but, my 20s, I thought I would not enjoy aging, but as I'm getting older, I actually find it, like, so it's just so fulfilling because all of a sudden, like, all your past decisions start to compound over time, and you start to, like, really have a sense of yourself, and it's just hard to do in your 20s. You haven't seen enough, and you haven't experienced enough.
Exactly. And like I honestly I'm excited for my 30s. I'm turning 26 next month in September. So I guess now it's like mid to late 20, like I'm closer to 30 than I am 20. So we're getting there. But I'm personally excited for like when things are a bit more settled and there's a bit more commitment in all areas of my life. So I am excited to age, hopefully gracefully, with the help of increasing my body IQ. So to tie it back and make it all full circle, truly it's so inspiring what you're doing. And I'm so excited to kind of be a part of the journey and be a part of the community here in New York. And the final question that I'll leave you with, you kind of already answered it, but aside from journaling, spending time with family in nature, all the things, what is something that brings you a bit of endorphins every day? Is it like a practice, a ritual, something that just lights you up?
It's just playing with my daughters. Like, I think they're just, like you just pick them up and they're trying to wrestle you, and I don't know, we just have such a good time, and I think, yeah, these moments are so sacred. So that's like the ultimate for now, but
I love it. I love it. Well, Scott, thank you so much. Such a pleasure having you on the podcast. I will share links to where people can connect with you and Mayo and get involved in the show notes and in the episode. So, everyone who's listening, you can go check there to get in touch with Scott and to go experience Mayo for yourself. It is a fun time and a very welcoming environment. I can attest to that. So, thank you.
thank you.